It started with a small dispute over property boundaries. I thought it would end there. It didn't. Karen Davis, my neighbor, decided to escalate. She started planting an illegal fence right on the boundary line, blocking my access to the creek that ran along the easement. I didn't come at her yelling or anything. I pushed back politely with proper legal documentation showing where the property lines were. That's when she called the sheriff. Deputy Rogers came out, looked at the documents, gave her a short lecture about property laws, and told her to have a pleasant day. You'd think that would settle it. But Karen had no intention of letting this go. 2 weeks later, I came home to find my fence had been cut in 3 places. Fresh tire marks were dug deep into the mud near the creek, and one of my beehives had been destroyed, frames scattered everywhere, honey dripping onto the grass. My dog Pixel stepped on a nail board that had been left behind by the fence line. He yelped in pain, and I rushed him to the vet. Antibiotics, a painkiller, and a warning to keep an eye on it for infection. That's when I knew I was done playing defense. I ordered 4 motion sensor cameras that would send alerts every 10 seconds until I muted them. I also hired a licensed surveyor, Nora Beltran. She was tough and efficient. She came out, marked the corners of my property with fluorescent stakes, and placed laminated placards explaining the criminal penalties for tampering with survey monuments. Later that night, the cameras pinged at 1:13 a.m. I checked the live stream, and there they were, 2 figures in hoodies, yanking the stakes and tossing them into the creek. One of them was holding bolt cutters. The moonlight caught the face of the second figure just for a moment. It was Karen. The other guy, I didn't need to know him, but Deputy Rogers did. That was Chandler, local troublemaker, always popping up on previous calls. Rogers got a warrant for criminal mischief and trespassing. At dawn, he and 2 other deputies knocked on Chandler's door. The body cam footage showed Chandler in his pajamas trying to play it off like he had been asleep all night. Rogers showed him a still image from my camera, Chandler, bolt cutters in hand, mid-grimace. Chandler shut up pretty fast. Karen didn't fare any better. Rogers found the stolen stakes in her garage, along with Nora's laminated placards and a half-empty can of spray paint, the same color used to deface my no trespassing signs. Karen claimed Chandler had stored tools there without her knowledge, but Rogers wasn't buying it. Both of them were arrested and taken to county jail. Karen made bond by lunch, but Chandler didn't. Turns out he was on probation for a 2021 check kiting scheme, which meant he was on a no-bond hold pending further review. While Chandler sat in jail, things took an even more interesting turn. My lawyer, Elliot, subpoenaed the HOA's financial records. We needed to trace the $3,500 that had been used to buy the gate Karen had illegally installed on my property. What we found shocked us. There was a cashier's check signed by Chandler with funds drawn from the HOA's reserve account. The check was labeled for the purchase of the gate, but that was just the beginning. As we dug deeper, we found several other checks Chandler had written, totaling nearly $46,900, all for grounds improvements that never actually happened. The gate wasn't the only thing he'd been funneling HOA money into. The HOA board was horrified. They voted unanimously to press charges against Chandler. Detective Miriam Page from the county's white-collar crime unit took over the investigation. She seized Chandler's home computer and discovered forged receipts, fake meeting minutes, and even a template for the neon green approval stamps Chandler used on his fake documents. And then we found the real kicker. Chandler had funneled some of the stolen HOA funds into Karen's private bank account, disguised as consulting fees. Karen lawyered up fast. She hired a defense attorney named James Hall, who charged $600 an hour and refused to answer any of our questions. But Chandler, he was in a tight spot. Facing probation revocation and new felony charges, he was desperate. He agreed to testify against Karen. After months of legal proceedings, things came to a head. Chandler finally pled guilty to violating his probation. That triggered an automatic 18-month prison sentence for his original check-kiting charges. But the DA made him an offer: testify truthfully against Karen, and he could serve a shorter sentence, 4 years, with parole eligibility in 2. Chandler agreed to the deal. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation. When it was his turn to speak, Chandler didn't hold back. He detailed how Karen had orchestrated the entire land grab, promising him a piece of my property once the HOA annexed it. In exchange, he'd handle all the illegal paperwork and the shady work under the cover of night. The prosecutor played footage from my Ring camera during Chandler's testimony. It showed him and Karen loading rebar into her SUV at 12:47 a.m., the timestamp matching the night the stakes had disappeared. The jury didn't need any more evidence. They found both Karen and Chandler guilty on all counts: felony conspiracy, theft, criminal mischief, and misdemeanor trespass. Karen's bond was revoked and she was sentenced to 18 months in prison. On top of that, she was ordered to pay me $32,000 in restitution for the damages and $46,900 to the HOA for the stolen funds. Karen's sentence came with a 5-year no-contact order that extended beyond her release. When I saw her in the courtroom after the verdict, she avoided my gaze, but I made sure to give her a polite wave. Not out of malice, but because it felt like closure. I'd finally gotten my land back, and I had a chance to move on. A year later, things had settled down, or so I thought. One afternoon, I received a letter from someone named Elaine Castor. She claimed to be Karen's heir and next of kin, and she insisted Karen had granted her a private right of way across my land. It was a move I knew well, an attempt to stir up legal uncertainty and force a quick settlement. But this time, I wasn't worried. Thanks to my lawyer Elliot and all the diligent work from the surveyors, we were prepared. We quickly discovered that Elaine's deed was a forgery, a bad one. The claim was pulled before the court hearing even started. The timing couldn't have been better either. Spring rolled in, and with it came an unexpected surprise: restitution checks from the state's crime victim fund. Karen's prison wages were being garnished at $58 a month. It would take decades to pay off her debt, but the symbolism mattered. But the story didn't end with Karen. A few months later, I got a letter from Chandler. He had earned a paralegal certificate while incarcerated, and in it, he apologized for all the harm he had caused. He even enclosed a hand-drawn map suggesting where I could place some orchard trees on my property. It was strange, unexpected, but I didn't ignore it. I wrote him back. I didn't promise anything, but I did mention that my sunflowers had grown taller than ever. In the end, things really did come full circle. Karen's former property was sold to a nonprofit called Sprout Tomorrow, an organic farming group dedicated to sustainability. They invited me to consult on planting native pollinators, something I'd always wanted to do. The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen had used the HOA rules to control her neighbors, and now her land would be used to nurture the community. On their first volunteer day, I showed up with my brush cutter. Deputy Rogers came by to help out, too, along with some of the new HOA members who had been part of the neighborhood's makeover. It felt good, honestly, working side by side with people who genuinely cared about the land. The air smelled like fresh earth, and there was laughter in the air as we worked to turn Karen's old lawn into something positive, a community garden. There were raised beds, tomato vines, and flowers everywhere. People were excited about the change, and I felt at peace. The whole ordeal had been long and exhausting, but seeing the transformation was cathartic. By October, Sprout Tomorrow hosted their first harvest dinner, featuring produce grown right on Karen's old property. It was a celebration of what had been created from what once felt like a battle lost. The menu was full of dishes like roasted butternut squash, garlic honey carrots, and heirloom tomato bruschetta, all sourced from the garden just outside my door. They even gave me a small nod for my role in the whole ordeal, but I just shrugged. The real victory wasn't the recognition. It was seeing nourishment grow where hostility once lingered. And as the seasons changed, I took another step forward. I finally installed my new barn, legally permitted this time. I used reclaimed wood from Karen's old structure to build it, a reminder of everything that had come before and everything that came after. Pixel still enjoys running through the fields, and I think we've both earned our peace. That's a great ending. It's reflective and uplifting, closing the chapter on a positive note while hinting at future possibilities. Is there anything else you'd like to add or modify to the outro, or does this wrap it up nicely for you?